Okay, welcome to Great Novels of the 22nd Century. We have the good fortune tonight of having Michael Moorcock as our guest. We are doing his novel Mother London, which is, in my humble opinion, a fabulous book. Um, Everybody has different copies. That's what I get a kick out of this when we're doing an other titles. There's so many to choose from. What we have, if I may introduce, Fritz Roberts is in Pennsylvania. She's
Hi,
our
Fritz.
she's our Zoom
Sorry.
guru. Rich Horton is in St. Louis with me. Lisa Connor, I'm not sure where you are, Lisa.
St. Louis.
Okay, St. Louis as well. Cliff, you know,
Yeah.
the IL Beating Buddies. This is the other Lisa, is in New Mexico.
Okay.
And there may be one or two others that will join us anon. But for now, we are it. I'm Mark Tiedemann. This whole lash up is kind of my idea. And I roped all these people into reading this novel. And I would.
You had to twist some arms, right?
Oh, actually, I kind of did, but that's another story for another time.
Not this one. Untwisted.
Yeah, not this one. I found it to be one of your more unexpected and idiosyncratic works. It seems to be neither fish nor fowl. It's got some fantastic elements, but it is in most ways a straightforward literary novel, and I found it extremely touching.
Thank you.
I don't know what everybody else feels about it.
Oh, I loved it. And
Me too.
Mike, it seems like, first of all, if I could address the telepathy aspect, was a great way to bring all the masses of London into the narrative from your from your three point of view characters, and makes London, the main character of the book, obviously. And
Thanks. Yeah.
and it's just, I mean, I can feel the love like coming off the page, how much love you have for this city. And I was, if can I ask a question, Mark? Can I start us off?
Sure, go ahead.
I was wondering, as we were touring London, with well, you have biblically named characters. That's another question. Joseph and Mary and David are your main characters.
Yeah, but that was I didn't do it deliberately. It was purely coincidental. I only realized it, when people started mentioning it actually in reviews. So anyway, carry on.
Yeah. So my question is, how much? I mean, there's such specificity of the neighborhoods and the places, and I've been to London a few times, but never going to be a Londoner. And like, did you have to do research, or is these all places that you just had in your head already from your own wanderings?
I didn't have to do any research. No, not at all. It's just, I was lucky, and the first job I had when I was 15, after I'd left school, was as a I didn't know I was getting this job. I mean, they made it the job when I got there. I was tricked into it, sort of, but that wasn't the job I'd applied for. But it was essentially as a messenger, going around initially between the docks and the foreign consulates. It was a shipping company, and in those days, of course, London had a lot of ships, and I mean, it was just ship after ship. I mean, it's dock after dock after dock. It just went on forever. I never saw the end of it, and so I'd have to go to the East End to the ships, and just talk to the captains of the ships, that sort of thing, or deliver things to them. I didn't talk to them except say hello, captain, and they would grunt, hello, boy, and then I had to go to the West End for the consulates, which were pretty much all situated there. So that was my first big, extensive knowledge of say central London, and then the extremes of East and West, and the rest just came from knocking about in London.
Sure.
Especially at pubs.
I mean, I've lived in St. Louis for all my life, and I don't think I could describe it that well.
Well, I don't know. I actually I was writing another sequence of books called which are about the events that lead to the Nazi Holocaust, the Pyat Quartet, and I'd got through two of them, I think, and it was so grueling having to concentrate on those events and to have a character of the kind that he was anyway. So that I just couldn't stand it anymore, and I just wanted to write a book that was, if you like, a happy book, as opposed to what I was doing. So I actually took time off to write Mother London. That's probably why it comes across as cheerful, because I was desperate for cheerfulness.
Oh, so that was between the laughter of Carthage and Jerusalem commands?
Yes, yes, it had to be. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was
because there was a long gap there, I remember.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it was just, well, I was just going crazy writing those books. In fact, I did go crazy writing the first one, and effectively, it was the end of a marriage, which I was very glad about, to tell you the truth, when I look back, because I did better the next time.
The current one seems to have worked out rather well.
Yeah, it's lasted a good deal longer, that's for sure. I think it was 6 years, that first one with Jill, and I think it's been at least 50 with, I think, about 50 with Linda. Yeah. So Anyway, that was the sort of, that was how the book came about initially.
I wouldn't call it relentlessly cheerful, but it's certainly a love letter to London.
Yes, it's not relentlessly cheerful. I mean, it would be crazy if I just did that. But yeah. I mean, it is that, as you say, a love letter. Yeah.
Speaking of telepathy, it seemed to me that Joseph Kiss is the only one of the three who's fully aware that that's what he has.
Well, yes, and even then, I leave it a bit open to doubt, because I wasn't, I was using it as a device, really, and I didn't want. I did another book years ago called Behold the Man, which people have seen as a time travel novel, and it did involve time travel. It was about a guy goes back looking for the origins of Jesus, and it was the same thing there, that I didn't want this, if you like, the fantastic element to intrude on the book, or the book to be about the people to say it was some kind of book about telepathy or so on. So I left it. Oh, thank you, great. Oh, excuse me. Please drink amongst yourselves.
Well, it worked. It didn't feel like a science fiction book about telepathy. It felt like a device to explore the minds of London, or perhaps the collective unconscious of London would be a more accurate representation.
From when I did, I started doing a magazine called New Worlds, and that project was to incorporate certain elements of science fiction into, if you like, the literary mainstream, because at the time myself and one or two other people thought that the literary novel had become a bit moribund. So and we were, we'd made our living as science fiction writers, but we weren't really science fiction buffs, if you know what I mean. And so we saw certain science fiction fantastic elements as being there to reinvigorate the novel. That was our project anyway.
It seems to have succeeded, right? Because a lot of mainstream literary novels now have fantastic elements.
Yes, there were before that. I have to say, it's not just me. I mean, it was me and Ballard, basically, who were doing that. And there had been novels like Angus Wilson's Old Men at the Zoo. I mean, almost every English novelist seemed to have one futuristic or fantastic book in them, and so there were quite a few knocking about, just as there are now with Margaret Atwood and Michael Chabon and so on. But there are more writers now, I think, who actually write that kind of novel, a novel which has a fantastic element in it, without it being a fantastic or fantasy book. I think of Harry. Oh God, Linda, what's Harry's name?
Harry who?
Well, Harry, Hari.
Harry Kunzru.
Kunzru, yes, who does almost nothing but that kind of novel, at least the ones I've read. And it seems, it's become a sort of acceptable, if you like, literary device now. And people, sorry.
No, nothing. I was just going to say, it's interesting that you say that you saw New Worlds, at least in part, as trying to reinvigorate the literary novel. And a lot of folks, I guess myself included, coming to it a little later, saw it as trying to revitalize science fiction.
Yeah, that's how it was described. And in fact, the American New Wave, as it was called, there were two new waves, really. There was one in England, one in America. Harlan Ellison and Judith Merril were pretty much the people that started in America. And they were really trying to perk up science fiction, I think. But Ballard and I were not trying to do that, really. We were trying to perk up literary fiction, experimental literary fiction at that, too. So we were more inspired by the likes of William Burroughs than we were, say, Philip K. Dick or the good SF writers. I'd stopped reading SF pretty much by the time I'd become the editor. So as tends to happen, it's one of those ironies. And so I hadn't read a great deal of SF at that point. I'd probably read more fantasy of certain kinds, there wasn't a lot of it about, but Mervyn Peake and people like that. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, you
bit of a digression, but
you quote,
I just read one of your anthologies from the early New Worlds. Best of New Worlds, I think, is the second one. And in the introduction, you talked about basically, as I interpret it, wanting to produce both good traditional science fiction and good experimental stories.
Yes, I did. Well, I had to, really, or I wouldn't have had any sales. I mean, I was coming out of a science fiction magazine, so I had to include decent science fiction stories, and I didn't see anything wrong with that. But my real interest, I must say, I mean, no, it wasn't just that. I'm sorry, I'm looking back now. I'm 64 when I started, but so we got some very good science fiction fantasy writers coming up at that time. People like Roger Zelazny and Thomas M. Dish, John Sladek. These are all Americans who were writing for New Worlds because they couldn't get published. You couldn't get what they wanted to get published in America at the time. And later, the interesting thing was they'd all had books rejected by American publishers, but after we published them in New Worlds, they started to get those same pieces started to get published. And it's funny, I used to say publishers, once they see something in print, they think, "Oh, I can do that," but you have to put it in print first, or they don't seem to have the imagination to make the necessary jump.
So it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem.
Yeah. We also did. We were the first people to write about Philip K. Dick as a serious writer. So there was a lot of interchange between England and America at that point. A lot of people like Norman Spinrad, Jim Salis, all of them living in England at the time. And I think the only one who didn't was probably Roger Zelazny. He never actually spent time in England anyway. Anyway, sorry, this
is all fascinating.
I can't help but note, related to that Angel Down by Daniel Kraus, which involves a fallen angel in World War I no man's land. just won the Pulitzer Prize.
Yeah, well,
So
yeah,
that's quite a bit of a changing landscape from the one you grew up in.
it certainly is. Yeah, I mean, in fact, fantasy as such, you couldn't call a book fantasy. My first books were fantasy, and you couldn't call them fantasy because they all thought that that meant children's fiction. As simple as that. I mean, nobody saw it as an adult form at all. And then people like Ballantine Books started doing an adult fantasy series, which started to push it into into something that grown-ups could or didn't feel embarrassed about reading. It wasn't just about, I don't know, it wasn't just George MacDonald and people like that. I still don't know if Tolkien whether he meant that set of books to be read by adults or children. I mean, it was, at the time, it was people were still not sure about it. Before it actually got into paperback in the States and became a sort of cult series, the reviews were very, very ambiguous, really, a lot of them.
So
none of this is about Mother London. Sorry.
No, I was about to
Yeah.
ask a Mother London question, which is, I know you survived the Blitz as a child,
Mm-hmm.
and that is impacting the lives of characters in your book.
Yes.
And I was wondering why. I mean, was it just because of your own life's, birth in 1939 that you decided to start your 20th century history of London with the Blitz? And how much of the particulars of that Blitz era were drawn directly, like from your own, childhood and fictionalized, as versus how much you were not?
Quite a lot, really, because we were in the path of the worst V-bomb attacks, because the Secret Service or Churchill, whoever it was, had actually I don't know quite what's the word, misinformed the Germans, who thought they were hitting important industrial sites, and in fact they were hitting somewhat important, as far as I was concerned, ordinary domestic. Excuse me, that's the cat. Don't. It's
We
all right.
love cats here. Cats.
Yes, well, yeah, but she's quite likely. She's rubbing herself against the. There we are. That's what I didn't know.
Oh dear.
Excuse me, sorry.
No worries.
That's cats being cats.
Yeah, exactly. As somebody said, proof that the world is round is that if it was flat, the cats would have knocked everything off it by now. Anyway, I'll hold it. I don't think I can actually. She's actually not whatever was keeping the thing upright. Oh no, that's not it. Anyway, there we are. I'll just hold it.
We call that technical difficulties.
Yes, right.
I thought it was interesting that personally that one of the novels I read just before this was Human Voices by Penelope Fitzgerald, which is set during the Blitz. It's a wonderful novel. And then it was just kind of a curious transition from that, and immediately seeing the story of a young boy growing up in the middle of bombs falling all around him.
Yeah, I think it's surprising to me that there are not more novels about the Blitz. I would have thought there would have been more, but there aren't that many that I can think of anyway. Penelope Fitzgerald's one of them. There were, of course, wartime novels, a few of them, Graham Greene and a few others, but I can't think of that many. It's one of those things that the people probably found it hard to get a handle on if they'd been adults experiencing it. As a child, it was probably easier for me to write about it because the adults were taking all of the the brunt of the they knew what was happening, and they were cheering kids up rather, so my mother used to hold me up during the dog fights. She'd hold me up, showing me the searchlights and the planes fighting and so on, and just make a game of it. Oh, look at that, great, woohoo! There go the searchlights and so on. So we were between three airfields, so it was fairly, we saw a lot of it. But I wasn't greatly traumatized by it as a result. The adults probably were, but I wasn't. Um, it wasn't always comfortable, but it was. We'd get excited, after an air raid, we'd actually go out looking for, looking for shrapnel, and we always hoped we'd find a dead German. We were always hoping to find a dead German so we could strip him of his goggles and helmet and all the other stuff. We were always disappointed, unfortunately. But I suppose, unfortunately, I'm not sure we'd have been too happy to have seen a real dead pilot. But it was sort of. It was a game often for us, and the big or the most memorable stuff was really after the war, when we were celebrating both victory in Europe and then victory in Japan. And I just remember big street parties, everybody cheering and so on. I thought it would go on for a long time. We'd have big street parties all the time, but fortunately, I suppose we didn't get them.
Yeah, I thought an interesting detail from David Mummery's childhood was that he didn't understand. He grew up with the wartime rationing and deprivation and didn't understand why the adults went on and on about certain foods and stuff.
Yeah, quite. I mean, I've still got some of my preferences are still food that we had during rationing, that people were complaining about, but I liked it. I liked tinned egg, that we had egg that came in sort of a dried egg, and it came in big cans, and you could make really good scrambled eggs out of it. So I don't remember any hardship really at all. The good thing was, I think my generation was the healthiest generation that ever grew up in England, because you couldn't buy sweets. You couldn't buy all the stuff that's bad for you. So we had a tremendously good diet, and the rationing favored children too. So we got a lot of orange juice, milk. That's the sort of stuff that's good for kids, and not very much stuff that was bad for us. And I remember when people were excited about when sweet rationing ended, and everybody was going out to buy sweets, and that was quite late in the 50s. I really didn't know, didn't have any pleasure in it. My mother didn't either, for that matter. She would swap her sugar rationing for other stuff, so we didn't have a lot of sugar. Anyway,
so to bring this back to a literary discussion for a moment, World War II it's sort of, just a given that was a transitional moment for pretty much the world. History took a turnaround, a pivot with that. But in terms of just bringing it back into our little pond for science fiction, it seems to me that was the point at which science fiction began to have real valence in the larger world, because all this stuff that had happened had opened the imagination of people to the possibility of some of the scenarios that had been deemed ridiculous in past science fiction, and now we could write about the human side of being on the cutting edge of change. So your stated desire to sort of perk up the literary mainstream, was that in response to them in some ways trying to put a cork in World War II and not pay attention to it?
No, not in short, not really. I don't think I thought like that. I mean, Ballard was my chief partner in this, and of course he'd grown up in a Japanese prison camp, a civilian camp. I mean, it wasn't as bad as the military camps. So, and in a way, we kind of we minimalized it. The one thing that people, I think people really sort of saw as a serious moment was the dropping of the atom bomb. And myself, Brian Aldiss, and Jimmy, unlike some of our contemporaries, actually saw the bomb as saving our lives. So we didn't really see it as being a particularly bad thing from our own point of view. Brian was just about to be sent in, as it were, into the Japanese area as a soldier. Jimmy was already imprisoned, and for some reason I didn't see it as being. And obviously, I saw it as a bad thing for what had happened to individuals, and there was concern for what it was doing. But I actually saw the bomb as being a peacekeeping, kept the balance of power so well that we had about at least about 50 years of relative peace, apart from Vietnam, and what's going on now, of course, which is horrible. But so in a way, it wasn't really something we saw. I think it might have been true in America more than here. Here I'm in America. Sorry.
I think you're in London right now in your head.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think it was because it was such a relief to have war over with so quickly, and the fears that went with it, fears of invasion and so on. It was much closer to us in many ways than it was to most Americans who were not really suffering in quite the same way. I mean, obviously people were, and there were a lot of soldiers who were. I was very glad to see them too. We had a lot of American friends who, we. Oh, sorry, did I switch somebody off?
No.
Somebody.
No, we just had somebody
I'm holding
join.
this, and I'm really clumsy. I'm likely to. Okay. Anyway, yeah. So I was sort of. I was. I don't know. I mean, I looked at it objectively. I think it was as much the bomb as it was the war that brought science fiction into reality. I remember an issue of Astounding Stories that came out in probably 50s, which actually showed Scientology and the bomb as being alternatives. Which you want, world-saving Scientology or the disaster of the bomber? And
as it is, we got both.
Yes, we got both quite. So that seemed to. I mean, there were people like John Brunner, for instance, in England, who were very seriously afraid of the bomb, and John was, much involved in anti nuclear demonstrations and that sort of thing. But most of us, I don't remember. We weren't really that. I think, as I say, we had this sense of relief that the war was over and that we hadn't had to be in it. They stopped conscription just before my 18th birthday, so I was rather glad about that. I didn't have to serve in the military, which was a bit of a shame. I mean, well, it wasn't a bit of a shame, but I'd done 2 years in the Air Training Corps because you got a better job in the RAF if you were in it. And so, in anticipation of being conscripted, I'd gone into the Air Training Corps and suffered the usual humiliations of the parade ground and so on, and then found I didn't actually have to go, which was a relief. Anyway, I can't really answer that very easily, I'm afraid. I haven't really thought about it, to tell you the truth, not a lot. So I'd have to think about it, quite a bit more to give you a decent answer.
Okay. Well, I was taken by some of the sub-threads in Mother London. David Mummery's interest in the Masons and some of the subterranean cults that run through it, and of course Joseph Kiss has that absolutely soul-shaking moment of finding bodies in the wreckage of the Blitz, and Mary Gasly waking up literally from a deep sleep of a number of years to a completely different world, and she hasn't aged a bit. But the institutions around them all seem to be alternately mysterious and benign, which I found kind of striking. Even the police who are trying to get David Joseph out of the greenhouse
Yes, right.
are being rather gentle and going out of their way to be understanding, but the institutions behind all this stuff are drawn in such a way that this could be a utopia in some sense.
Well, it was my experience. We had the very powerful Labour government, which gave us the National Health Service, free education all the way through from from beginning to end into college and so on. And the world had become almost utopian in some ways. It suited the population of that time. As the population grew, it started to put stress on it. But between those years, between the end of the Second World War and the Margaret Thatcher coming to power in 1980, which is about the same time that Reagan came to power, when they were definitely right-wing revolutions. I mean, they'd been planned for a long time by people frustrated and who were anti left, if you like, and so they happened very quickly. And I remember it. We did go from being a very egalitarian country, very welcoming to foreigners and so on, to a pretty awful country, tell you the truth, with money being used as a almost as a moral factor, so that everything that I'd been experiencing up until about 1980 was we expected to build on that and things to get better. And instead, things got considerably worse for us in England anyway. Can't speak for America because I wasn't living here until the 90s, but certainly the language was egalitarian. It was thought to be rather not the thing to display any wealth. I mean, it's a bit like Denmark still is, for instance, where people feel a bit embarrassed if they've got more than the next the person next door. So sort of keeping down with the Joneses rather than keeping up with them, and I noticed it happening so quickly that it almost took my breath away. And it was a dismantling of it wasn't simply the dismantling of a certain amount of socialism. And at the time, I had thought that Thatcher coming in would limit the power of the unions, and they had become too strong. I mean, they were just demanding more and more, much more than was there to ask for. So when she first got in, I thought, oh well, maybe it'll modify things, but it did more than modify things. It changed them out of recognition, really, and all the optimism and the energy that we had from the 60s anyway onwards. There was I think that was where New Worlds was part of that, just as the Beatles were part of that, and pop art was part of it. A lot of new movements in the arts were part of it. It was all it was genuine energy, and that was what I think attracted the American writers that started to come over. And it wasn't just, of course, science fiction; it was a lot of others as well, different artists as well. I think they were a bit disappointed after a while because it wasn't quite the utopia that they imagined, but it was still a very good place to live. And as I say, I mean, everything about it, for me anyway, was from the perspective of somebody who really does believe in egalitarianism, and a society which strives to that, which I think both America and England, were certainly doing, and certainly within our, as it were, idealism. It was a very good time to be alive. Say 1945 to 1980, which is quite a long time too, given reality of how things, how oh, sorry, how things are.
Yeah,
we had a bit of a
Yeah.
rougher ride here with the Korean War and the Vietnam War.
Well, quite. And we had the Korean War too. Of course, we were part of that. But we luckily stayed out of the Vietnam War. And it's a shame that America didn't. I mean, I always thought it was a bit odd that people thought that if the French Foreign Legion couldn't do it, then as it were, then it was sort of surprising that somebody else thought they could.
Yeah, well, certain American presidents are
quite. Yeah,
like the current one thinking, oh, we'll just waltz into Iran and take over in a couple of days.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's such a big country and so isolated in many ways from the rest of the world that it's easy to see how that kind of thinking takes hold of enough people to support a president doing that. But it's still disappointing. I mean, Europeans, one of the reasons I'm living in Texas is because Europeans often wonder how Americans, who seem so European in so many ways, are not, as it were, European. And it's the reason I moved to Texas rather than to some, I don't know, English enclave, like, I don't know, Northern California or somewhere like that, was so that I could actually experience how real people, were thinking and feeling. And it gives me a perspective on Trump, which I don't think I'd have otherwise, if I hadn't moved here. It's still not the worst place to be. I mean, I'm near Austin, sure. And it's
Austin's lovely.
Yeah, but it's oh, I think I may be close to turning us off just a bit. I'm just hoping for the best. Anyway, back to Mother London. Yeah, I mean, well, the other thing is, I think there's a lot of humor in Mother London, which I was able to put into that, which I couldn't necessarily put into another kind of book.
I kept laughing out loud. So.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah. I was very fond of Joseph Kiss. I mean, he's almost my alter ego, I think.
There was a lot of you in him. Yes.
Yeah.
I kept seeing Tom Baker playing the role.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, he'd be great. He would have been. Yeah. I'm very sorry that was never done as a TV series. Really, is what it would have to be.
It would have to be. Yeah.
But I think it'd just be expensive, and probably too complex too. So, I don't think it'll ever happen, or at least not in my lifetime, which can't be that much longer now.
Well, one of the things that has struck me throughout reading you since I was probably 13 or 14 is a really wide range of, you go to your early stuff, like the early Elric stories or or like the Sundered Worlds. Those two stories, they're basically pretty crazy stuff. and and then Behold the Man, which I was very impressed by when I read it. And that was probably when I was 14 or 15. And then I loved the Jarrett Carnelian stories, the Dancers at the End of Time.
Yeah, they're funny, of course, too. Yes,
yeah, they are very
writing
funny.
In a
those.
completely different way, but yeah.
Yeah, but then you get to that and you get through the various fantasy series, Quorum and so on. Were you always aiming just to do whatever you wanted to do next, or were you aiming to do the more literary stuff, like the War Haunted Worlds, Pain be an example, or Gloriana, or Mother London?
Well,
or do you just wanted to do everything?
Well, I did in a way. You know, I was a journalist to begin with, more a journalist than anything. I mean, most of my early work was journalism. So it may be that. I don't know. But you know, in a way, I wanted to build on things that I'd read, and my reading was very wide. So I really didn't see any need, you know, any reason not to. Not to write widely as well. I think you keep your work invigorated if you keep setting the bar higher and doing something that's hard for you to do. The danger with having a successful or number of successful series like the Elric books and the Hawkmoon books and Corrin books, all of those fantasies, which of course are still making me more money than anything else, but and are still the most popular things, you know. But the danger with that, of just repeating that, is that they just get stale, like, you know, like so many writers I'm sure we can all think of who have become stale writing series. So you set yourself, well, you just keep raising the bar, I suppose. And that's really, I think, mostly why to be honest, I'm not a very I don't think very deeply a lot about my own work and so on. So I haven't really thought a lot about it. I am a storyteller, and you know, and there are a lot of stories I want to tell. So, and there are different means of telling those stories, you know, and I think that's mostly what it's to do with. Just and you know, if I can't find a book that is giving me what I want, then I tend to write one. You know, and that's that. And I don't. I mean, for my sins, I don't read an awful lot these days. I mean, in the last five or 10 years, I haven't read nearly as much as I used to read. I've been writing, and if you know, rather than take a book down from the shelf, I've tended to write one.
So, speaking of writing things recently, The Wounds of Albion, which is you've turned in but is not out yet.
Yeah.
And you've said that this is going to tie in your Eternal Champion and your literary things like the Pyat books and this book, I assume.
Well, it's, you know, I had this overall Eternal Champion idea of using similar characters, you know, it's the same characters in all sorts of different books, fantastic books as well as realistic books. So, and that's been the project for, well, since I started. Well, I mean, one of the first stories I ever wrote was called The Eternal Champion, and was the eternal, you know, was the basis of a lot of this. And the Sundered Worlds was the first place I mentioned the multiverse, and so, you know, all of that, the idea of multiplicity and so on, and different stories, you know, the same people being in different stories.
Well, Joseph Kiss reminded me a lot of Professor Falstaff at the Rise of Time.
He is. He's very much a development of Professor Falstaff. Who was. I mean, I wasn't writing very well then, and you know, I couldn't do a lot with him, but yeah, he's the template really. Yeah. So yeah, and as The Wounds of Albion is the last Eternal Champion book. It winds up that entire series. I mean, it takes both the real. It's, as you know, it's half realistic and half fantastic, and it brings all those threads together and finishes it off. The next book, the book I'm writing at the moment, is just a straight novel. Well, it's a straight novel, partly trying to work out. My friend Tom Dish, as you probably know, killed himself, and so I'm trying to write about that, write about how he came to kill himself, and his life before that, and so on. I've got some ideas, and I had some ideas, and I'm developing those. And as I write, I'm finding more ideas coming. But that's just an absolute straight novel. It doesn't have any other characters in it from any other books. And nobody has to. Oh, sorry, nearly got it off. And and that's it's difficult. It's the first book I've written, the first novel I've ever written, which I didn't have a commission for. All the other books I've ever written, whether they were straight fiction or science fiction or fantasy, whatever, I had a publisher before I wrote it. And this is the first one and it's a very strange feeling not to. I haven't got a deadline, I haven't got somebody breathing down my neck. I haven't got somebody who's paid me money in advance. I'm doing it all
on spec.
On spec.
Yeah, on spec. I feel completely naked to the world.
Welcome to the unwashed masses, Mike.
Well, quite. I mean, all my friends. I mean, none of my friends wrote the way I have written. I mean, again, it's the habits of journalism where I would, I'd get a job and I'd do the job and get paid for it, and I just carried that on into fiction, and it really is quite strange to be like every one of my friends. I need advice. I need help. Quite a lot.
Wow.
I can certainly offer you sympathy from
Yeah,
personal experience.
Yes,
some of us have always been in that condition.
Yes, I know. I mean, as I say, most of my friends are, but it's just one of those things with me. It didn't occur to me till really about a couple of weeks ago. Why did I feel so strange? Because I didn't have somebody breathing down my neck saying, you promised this by Tuesday. So I think I'm going to have to fake it, get somebody to get Linda, to start saying, where's the manuscript? Anyway, that's.
If you want, I can send you weekly emails that are increasingly strident.
Yes, thank you. That would probably do it, actually. Yeah, so I'd hate you, of course, at the end of it. So, you'd have to take that risk.
Well, we're bumping up against the 1 hour limit your wife set, so I wanted to find out if any of the people who haven't asked a question yet have any questions or comments.
Yes.
Lisa, Fritza, Kathy, or are you just too overwhelmed by the book that?
Well,
it'll be a short question. It will be a long answer. Don't worry.
Yes,
I do have a question. I'm interested in the depiction of mental illness, or and when you were talking about sort of a utopian society of London and the period that you set these characters, I was thinking about the depiction of people with mental illness, right? And they have a tight-knit community, but I think, I don't know, maybe this is the US. People with mental illness are not treated very well, and especially during that time period. So to me, that was also a bit utopian. What was your thought about that when you were creating these characters and their at least what's been labeled as mental illness by society?
Yeah. Well, it's based on my own experience of, I've known quite a lot of people who, had those problems over the years. And coming out of the drug culture, I knew people, who had, as it were, those causes as well. And it's. I think we've come a long way since then. But both countries, in fact, all advanced countries have come a very long way in a number of issues, feminism as well. I mean, there's a whole lot of different issues which in the in the 60s certainly were simply not addressed or not understood or misnamed or whatever, and those are things that I did feel important. I was trying to describe to some extent not a utopia but a world which was improving in its understanding, because that's really what I wanted the book to be. I wanted it to be a positive book that had a sense of the future and things improving in the future. And in those areas, whereas in some areas, we've rather fallen backwards, I think we have improved to quite a large extent. Our understanding of children's problems, I think, in particular, I've known one or two, not my own children, thank goodness, but friends' children and so on, who really are in far better state now than they would have been 40 years ago, say, whenever I wrote the book. I mean, but so I don't think I was deliberately not pessimistic in that book. I mean, it's not a pessimistic book, and it tried to show an optimistic side of things. Since I was already writing, with the Holocaust books, I was already writing a pretty miserable subject. Although they are comedies, but only barely, and a lot of people probably wouldn't find them particularly funny. I mean, the events are not funny. So yes, I think we have come quite a long way from when I wrote the books, and but I was probably looking on the bright side too, trying to anyway. I don't think the three people who go to therapy, whatever you call it, I can't remember what it was called, but actually, go every week to.
I think it's just group. You call it
group. Yes, it's a group, and I mean, they probably were as well treated as it was possible to be treated, but if I was being realistic, I probably would have addressed some of the things that were wrong in those days too. But I was trying not to. I had friends who had serious mental illnesses, both in America and in England. I mean, and there wasn't a lot of difference in the way they were being treated, I must say. So yeah.
That's interesting. And what was so lovely, and to me that less realistic, was the acceptance of all the other people in their surround of all of their idiosyncrasies and their breakdowns.
That is a difference, I think. England's a lot more, at least a lot more forgiving of idiosyncrasy than America. America's a much more people. I mean, I've noticed this quite a bit. That what's the word, Linda? Judgmental. Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, American diagnostics is very good. So we've all benefited from that. I think very definitely. But yeah, there is a difference. I think the English are a lot. I don't know. I say this. I haven't lived in England now for 40 or 30 odd years. No, it's 40. But anyway, I can't remember how long. A long time. 30. Okay.
I think it's about 32, 33.
Yeah, yeah. I think we moved here in 95. Was it?
You moved
95?
in like 93. You and I moved to the Austin area at the same time.
Okay.
And I moved there in 93 and left in 95, and I'd already met you several times during that initial period.
I don't think it was 93 though.
Might have been 94.
Yeah, I think it probably was.
I remember you were doing signings at Adventures in Crime and Space
yes,
and things like
well,
that.
I was coming here, of course, before I actually moved here, so that could, yeah, okay.
So I might have met you in 93 before you moved.
Yes, quite, because I originally went to a convention in College Station, I think, and from College Station, Charlie Brown, the editor of Locus, drove us all, a bunch of us, up to Austin, and I liked the look of Austin, which is one of the reasons that I moved here when we did. Yeah, a big mistake in some ways. I thought all the wildflowers, with the beautiful wildflowers, are there now at the moment, and they're all over Texas, and it just looks wonderful. And of course, it's spring, so the climate is not too hot, and I thought, oh, this is just like Oxfordshire.
And then you hit summer.
Well, it wasn't just that. I thought, in England, as long as you don't harm anybody's land, you have the right to walk on it, or or have a picnic on it, or whatever.
Here, that is not Texas.
It's not Texas at all. And I'd heard the songs, wide open spaces, and and big skies and all of that, and I was thinking, oh, great, it's going to be. And that is something. It's a more repressive country than England. I do have to say that, and I feel it in a lot of different ways. But there are other, there's pros and cons. I'm not. I'd be an idiot just to complain. I wouldn't have been here this long if I found it intolerable. And I did, really did honestly want to find out how people thought properly, and not just good old boys, as it were, but pretty much everybody. Also, I like what brought me. The other reason was in the Blood trilogy. I set those in the American Southwest, and I was at a what do you call them? One of those big game parks, places where you have rides and things.
Amusement park.
Yeah, with my nieces and my brother-in-law, and we were behind a bunch of kids. This is in Houston, behind a bunch of kids who were just talking amongst themselves, and there was a sort of mixture of Spanish, black, white, and so on, all mixed up, and all having a good time. And the music of their voices really attracted me to, and I really tried to reproduce that in those books. It was serious, serious stuff for me. I really did like it, and I like the language.
Oh, I love those books, and the Deep Fix album that you did with that setting.
Yeah,
Terminal Cafe.
I think we lost. I think
we can still hear you.
Yes, I can still hear you too. Terminal Cafe was the album. Yeah. Hello.
Yes. It was a great album. My favorite Deep Fix album.
Oh, good. Thanks. Well, it was my sort of my homage, I suppose, to where I'm living.
Sure.
Can you see me?
We cannot
see.
So it's probably. I mean, it's been an hour, so probably this is a sign from the computer gods.
No timer on it, Linda says. So it was probably me, because I've not the first time I've completely botched up a Zoom. Sometimes rather more crucial than this one, I have to say. But anyway, here we are. Well, it's. I'm sorry I haven't spoken as much about Mother London as perhaps we should have done, or I should have done.
Oh, I think
but we have loved this conversation.
Yeah,
Well, thank
And this group generally varies the discussion from the book and goes away and comes back. So
yeah,
you were actually, I think you came in under par. You did a really good
above
job.
average in amount of talk about the book.
Oh, there you are.
yeah, here I am. Yeah.
Versus whatever time.
He shut it off. I put it back on.
Yeah.
Thank you, Linda.
Okay. Any other questions from?
If you have time for another question,
Yeah,
I am
yeah,
curious. I have visited London and I loved it. I've lived in big cities and I love them. But what is it about London that so many people write about it? And not just on a personal level, but it seems like there's something there.
I think there was. I have to say, when I go back now, it's another country, as they say. It's become too rich, really, in a way that there isn't enough diversity anymore. I mean, there still is a fair bit, but not nearly as much as there used to be. People have been forced out of the city simply because they can't afford it. The house prices are horrendous. Partly why I live in Paris half the year, and Paris, believe it or not, is actually cheaper than London. So that's part of it. Yes.
Yeah. I'm going to butt in because our middle grandson, Tommy, has just got married, and he's about 23, I think, 22 or 23, and he just got married in January to a lovely Malaysian woman, and they're both lawyers. Tommy is sort of a
Congratulations.
a corporate lawyer. Well, we haven't met her, and it was a 6 months love affair, so we're not sure about anything, But anyway, we're being supportive. Anyway, the two of them just got what is a cheap apartment in London. And this cheap apartment is £1,500 a week.
Oh, my goodness.
That's like $2,000 a week.
Whoa.
And it's not a great place to be living. I mean,
that they think that is a cheap apartment because they're in the docklands, but they have no view of the river or anything. And they have scaffolding up on the building.
Oh my goodness.
And I mean, the homelessness and the people sleeping rough and all of those things have gone up enormously in London over the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years. So that if you haven't got a passel of money, and I mean a lot of money, good luck finding a place to live there.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's just unbelievable. And people who are wealthy have bought up, and this is a friend of ours that we know quite well, have bought up what used to be council apartments, run by the council, public housing. When they started selling those under Thatcher, I think it was. Wealthy people bought them up, and now they rent them privately at those rents.
So
it's just. It's sad to see. It really
it's probably good to visit. I mean, we do go once a year over to London because and also into the country. We rent somewhere in the country as well, because that way I can have all my kids out to stay with us. But it's a bit depressing for me. It isn't the city that I wrote about in Mother London, that's for sure.
Yeah, I wasn't sure to mention this, but there's a series of novels by the late Christopher Fowler. They're detective novels, Brian May. And it struck me that he has that same loving attention to the geography and feel of London as you've exhibited here, but he addresses a lot of that as the books go on, because they keep one of the characters is always bitching constantly about how it used to be.
Yeah, well, I don't like to be too much like that, because my children aren't.
They don't know
they don't feel it as badly as I do. Yeah. But I mean, Central London is now really one big shopping mall, as I see it. It's or entertainment mall. If it's again, we stay in Central London partly because we're lucky in having a club where we've been in it for years and years, and it's cheap for us to stay there. But it's right at the heart of what I think of as being the corrupt heart of the city. All the people who got us into Brexit and so on, and the people who are use immigration as a a political point and all that sort of thing. Because I think both our countries had a great tradition of welcoming immigrants, and that's that's not what it was.
And that's one of the reasons we like Paris as much as we do, because the people, we don't live in tourist town in Paris. We live up in the 10th, which is one of the most mixed communities I've ever seen. Because we have there are a few Parisians, usually older. There are Algerians, Vietnamese, Tunisians, Japanese, Chinese. We have an Orthodox synagogue down the street from us, with a mosque across the street from it and 1 block away. It's African, there's African, Moroccan.
And they are all getting on. I mean, that's the great thing.
You can find any kind of food imaginable. And of course, Indians and Pakistanis. And I mean, it's just a wonderful place to live, But someone was asking me today if they are rude and hate Americans where I lived. And I said, well, no. I said, they're very forgiving. I said, because we all speak a different language than the one we're trying to speak there in Paris, So if I say to somebody, I'm sorry, I don't speak much French, they go, oh, that's okay, and go on,
Well, also everybody speaks English, almost everybody. I mean, people are educated to speak a really high level of English, so that's a great advantage for us.
It used to be like that. Where we lived in London, you used to see Africans and, and Indians and Pakistanis and all of that. And I mean, it's just not the case.
Well,
anymore.
They're living, if they've been pushed out further and further.
It's sort of like LA, where they've moved everybody further and further out, away from the sea, away from the beach.
It's again, when you use property, living spaces as a sort of financial tool, where you invest in property rather than buy yourself a roof over your head. It's become it means that the whole quality of the place changes, and gentrification doesn't just mean people making their houses a bit nicer or whatever. It actually means that they're half the places aren't lived in. They're bought. There are a lot of Chinese business people and Arab business people,
Russians.
And Russians who oligarchs who are buying up large tracts of it. So you don't want to sound too much like Brandon May, as it were. You don't want to just keep on complaining, because your experience, my experience is not is not the same.
Yeah.
But
we're the ancients now.
Yeah. I don't want to be the grumpy old man, get off my lawn.
Well, it won't surprise you that this is the exact thing that's happening in San Francisco.
I'm sure it is. I mean, we couldn't afford to live in the San Francisco area at all now. Same, I'm sure.
Yeah, our friend in Marin County who lives up a hill off of, I think it's Tamales Bay. They bought like a hippie house in the for $33,000, and it's worth multi-millions now.
Yeah.
I mean, and they've kept it running and kept it fixed, but I mean, there's nothing that special.
But an idea. I mean, it's not just London. It's remote Yorkshire, the Dales, where I bought a house for £3,000 when I first got some film money, and it was it's a big, drafty old house, but there it was, and it was selling for, what was it, 350,000? I mean, beyond, so far beyond almost any new people trying to start. And that was, I bought it because it was cheap, admittedly, and the Dales were cheap. But the idea that the Dales of all places should be expensive when it's pretty rugged country, My boss is telling me is telling me to wrap it up.
All righty.
She does this
Well,
with everybody, by the way.
Oh,
It's
no,
just-
I
But
understand.
it's been a
Thank
nice
you.
rel-
I
It's
wanna
been a nice,
thank you.
relaxed
Thanks much.
conversation.
Yes, it has.
Thank you.
It's been very nice. I've enjoyed it a lot.
We'll send
I'm
you the
sorry I
link when
haven't-
it goes up on YouTube.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. well,
Thank you, Mike, for
Thank you.
appearing. Thank you, Linda,
you.
for
And thanks
tech work.
everybody. It's been, as I say, very nice, and thanks for for the conversation.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you, sir.
It was
Good.
delightful.
Bye.
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 Bye.